All right, so there's some more information about ancient China that is really fun to discuss. One, this whole lesson, this whole part, we're going to be talking about Shi Huangdi, one of my favorite people. Um, well, he's really, well, you'll find out. He's really a major jerk. But we're going to talk about him all the way to the Hans, which is another empire that ended up ruling ancient China. So this funny looking man that you see before you, some of you guys actually remind me of him a little bit, but this funny looking man is a guy named Shi Huangdi. Originally, his name was Ying Jiang, all right? Well, if you remember in the last part that we discussed, the Warring Kingdom period. Remember the Warring Kingdom period, everything was in chaos. People were fighting. It was over 200 years of warfare. That's pretty hardcore. The whole society was fractured. They were killing each other. Well, this guy named Ying Jiang, he was part of the Qin Kingdom. Well, the Qin Kingdom ended up conquering them all. He ended the Warring Kingdom period, and he's like, you know what? I'm going to change my name. I'm going to call myself Shi Huangdi, which literally means first emperor. Well, what is an emperor? Emperor is kind of a self-explanatory term. The emperor is someone that rules an empire. You guessed it, an empire. You guys are brilliant. It is someone that rules an empire. China became an empire because many different groups of people went under one ruler. Well, he was a legalist. Legalists were hardcore. Legalists believed that the law was the most important thing. If you break the law, you will get destroyed. Shi Huangdi was a very violent man. He was very cruel. So say Shi Huangdi was like, hey, I heard this man is talking about me behind my back and says my kingdom is not great. You know what? Let's kill him and his family. And that is what Shi Huangdi did. He ruled with what you might eventually hear is called an iron fist. Not literally an iron fist. That is a metaphor. Actually, that is an idiom, back to language arts. But he ruled with an iron fist. He did not play games. What he did was all of his enemies, or all the noblemen that he believed that might try to fight him, he actually kept them in the capital right under his thumb just so he can keep an eye on them. But he also broke up his area into his empire into 36 different provinces or different areas to govern, and he put people that he would trust to rule over them, help govern them. Okay, well, remember we talked about legalism. We also talked about Confucianism. Well, Shi Huangdi did not like Confucians. What he did is when he got into power, he literally killed hundreds of Confucian scholars, and he actually had massive book burnings. Oh, this is Confucianism? Let's go light it on fire. Shi Huangdi was a pretty terrible man, okay? But he kind of brought stability to the country. Now, we are going to talk in a little while about what happened when he died, but anyway. So, I said Shi Huangdi was a really cruel person, and he was a cruel person. Horrible, horrible dude. You would not want him as your president. But what he did is he unified an empire. He unified the empire, was the first emperor of China, okay? And he was an extremely powerful man. He was also kind of paranoid. He believed that people were always trying to kill him, so he constantly slept every single day in a different place. Pretty paranoid. Well, he not only unified an empire that hated each other, he took it a step farther and he conquered even new lands, brought more people under the banner of the Qin dynasty. Well, after conquering lands, he would also build irrigation projects. Remember, an irrigation system helps transport water to other areas where they might build canals out of major rivers in order to provide water for areas that might not get that much water. It could also help control floods, right? Well, he built many works like that, but he also built the Great Wall of China. And the Great Wall of China was, in essence, a wall to protect from invasion. It was a massive project, and he actually killed, he literally worked people to death. And some estimates say that roughly over 500,000 people, 500,000 people would die building that wall. And what he would do, or what his workers would do, is they would literally bury a ditch and build a wall over it. So pretty hardcore. Well, like I said, he was pretty paranoid. When Shi Huangdi realized that he was getting old, he was going to die, he's like, man, everything that I built is going to be gone. So what do I do? Well, he began to build his tomb. And what he built in his tomb were these soldiers called terracotta soldiers. They were clay soldiers, and the belief was that these soldiers would protect him after he died. They would protect him in the afterlife. Well, he also began to search for eternal life. And according to tradition and to some historical accounts, the reason why Shi Huangdi died is he took a pill. This pill was supposed to help him live forever. Well, it did not, and Shi Huangdi died. Not only that, a couple weeks to a year after he died, his tomb was completely destroyed. People robbed him, took treasure from his dead corpse. So even though he was kind of a cruel ruler, people remembered that. And now that he was dead, it kind of took advantage of it. So that is kind of what Shi Huangdi did. He is hardcore, and that's kind of why he's one of my favorites. I don't idolize him, but he's a pretty interesting person in history. This is a great picture of the Great Wall of China. It is massive. It's literally thousands of miles long. But here's the thing. Shi Huangdi originally built it, correct? Well, when Shi Huangdi died, it eventually fell in disrepair. It took peasants, who were just common laborers, often farmers, that's a vocab word, the peasant. It took thousands upon thousands upon thousands of peasants to build this massive wall. Now, later on, after Shi Huangdi died, it fell into disrepair, but future rulers began to extend the wall in order to protect them from invasion from the north. Now, this is a picture of the terracotta warriors. The terracotta warriors, once again, Shi Huangdi built. Now, he made them out of clay. Well, he had laborers make them out of clay, but they were they were to represent what soldiers actually looked like, and they were hopefully in order to help protect him in the afterlife. He actually placed them in battle formation. If you see and you look closely, you can see chariots, you can see horses. Some of them were destroyed during excavations, but man, there are literally thousands of them, which it's pretty, if you can think about it, a massive undertaking of just constant building, you know? So it's just kind of cool to kind of look at it from afar, but you can also see it close up. These are what the terracotta warriors look like. Like, you can see facial expressions. You can see the grooves on their armor, like just the intensity and the realism behind it. Now, this is really a work of art. So after Shi Huangdi came around, after he died, his son took over, and his son was not as strong of a ruler. And so there was a massive rebellion, and more chaos ensued. Well, even though chaos ensued, a new empire rose out, and that would eventually be known as the Han Dynasty. Now, just in a couple seconds, we're going to talk about who the Han Dynasty is, but right here you kind of see the map of the Han Dynasty. It was probably the largest Chinese empire, and remember the dark outline you see on the map is actually modern-day China. So they're pretty close to the man, I can't think right now. Pretty close to modern-day borders. It's just kind of a pretty cool kind of thing to look at. Well, anyway, this is the Han Dynasty. So life and emperors during the Han. Well, the Han government was a lot different than the Shi Huangdi than the Qin government. The Qin government, remember, were legalists, but they were legalists to a massive scale. If you disrespected them, they would kill you and your family. They'd kill everyone you ever knew. They were kind of hardcore. Well, the Han were much different than that. They were less cruel than Shi Huangdi and his fellow cohorts. All right, they lowered the taxes, so taxes weren't so high, so people were able to afford living, and there wasn't a lot of poverty. They replaced this idea of strict legalism with Confucianism. Now, Confucianism, if you remember back in the last section, was a philosophical movement that did turn religious towards the end, but it was really about educating the young and making sure everyone knows their roles in society. So teach a child how to be a child, teach a student how to be a student, teach a ruler how to be a ruler. It was about being pious and looking out for the good of society, not the good of the individual or the good of the self. The government also had a bureaucracy, and a bureaucracy is just a fancy way of saying that there was appointed officials that would run parts of the country, or even branches of the country. So for instance, you might have an administrator over taxes. You might have an administrator over the military. You might have an administrator over police, or the administrator over farmers, or so on. So it was helped to delegate power, because one person can't rule a massive empire, just like today how a president can't govern every single person, every single state. So he breaks up the government into different branches. Well, there was an individual eventually that kind of rose named Empress Lu. Lu is a woman, and hence the name Empress. Women were technically not allowed to be an empress. However, Lu's husband and Lu's husband died, and Lu's child was very young. So she kind of became a surrogate, or a replacement empress, and she did this for the next few generations of her kids. Eventually, she was overthrown, but it's just kind of, you got to mention Empress Lu because women don't really get a lot of credit. Then you have Emperor Wudi. Emperor Wudi was another famous emperor who expanded the borders even farther. The legacy of ancient China is huge. Ancient China is extremely significant in world history, and it deserves to be discussed. Well, certain things that they created, they invented. One thing is the use of paper. As you see here, when we ever talk about paper, we talk about papyrus. Well, they created paper sheets and made from trees, right? Well, the paper was developed in China, and it helped spread Confucian ideas, especially during the Han Dynasty. Well, another thing they created was a compass. Compasses, if you see them, will always point north due to a magnetic field. Well, the Chinese were the first to discover this, right? Well, eventually compasses would be updated to help navigate on land and also navigate on water. They improved farming tools, since there was so much land to cultivate, they rebuilt the plow, wheelbarrows, all these different ideas. Well, culture and ideas was important as well. One thing that's really fascinating, that is honestly probably in my opinion the coolest thing that they did had to do with silk. If you see silk or feel silk, it's very soft to the touch. Well, silk was a Chinese secret for 1,000 years. It was only created in China, and no one knew how to make it. They would try to create it themselves, especially in Europe, but they couldn't figure out how. Well, the secret to silk, at least authentic silk, was the silkworm. There's this little worm that almost like a spider kind of, but it kind of spews this thread, and people would collect this thread and create fabric out of it. And that was the secret of silk for 1,000 years. Can you guys keep a secret for 1,000 years? Another important thing was iron. The Chinese kind of discovered iron in a way, and they exported that idea around the world. So these ideas, the legacy of ancient China is huge. We get a lot of philosophy from ancient China. We even get a lot of modern medicine from ancient China. So just keep that in mind whenever you think Chinese. You can always think of Chinese. You really can't think of Chinese. Anyway, so the legacy of ancient China.